All right, good morning. The coffee is still not here, but I'm going to get the wave when it is. Feel free to get up during my introduction. If I get that wave, I'll let you know, and grab some coffee. It'll be just in the next room. Apologies for, I'm not sure why it's, are you giving me the wave? No. Okay. All right, so anyway, good morning, and welcome to this mini conference about general education. Although it doesn't look that mini, I thank you all for coming. We're so fortunate to have with us today a dean, an associate dean, and a director of an arts and humanities program, each of whom recently oversaw the review and revision of the general education program at their respective public Research One university. After a thorough process, each of these universities chose a different model in their revisions, and in a few moments we will hear from our guests about what these models are and what process was used to achieve them. As we set out on our own path to review and revise our general education program, I believe it will prove invaluable to see what other schools have done and to be able to ask questions and engage with our participants. This mini-conference follows several activities around general education review that have occurred over the past year in preparation for a more formal review. Last winter, I created a task force of faculty and I asked them to do a brainstorming exercise without thinking too much about what was feasible and without attention to parochial concerns like budget implications and where the tuition would flow. I asked them to think outside the box about what a general education could look like and to write up a narrative of the ideas they discussed so that we could start this process by thinking big, maybe even thinking a little crazy, just as an idea-generating exercise to get us started. The report they created, which is available on my website and in the box folder with the other materials for this event, provided many useful insights and ideas. That group also did a campus conversation last September to discuss their report and answer questions. In addition, we held an East-West mixer on this topic, where faculty from across campus gave 4-minute talks about what they thought should be the focus of the new Gen Ed program. And finally, there's a year-long interdisciplinary course going on in the Innovation Center in which senior students are studying this question and have been presenting their findings and conclusions quarterly to me and interested faculty. I'm very grateful to those students, some of whom may be here later today. Right now, I think they're mostly in class. As I stated at the campus conversation last fall, I don't think that our general education program here at UIC is severely broken, and it has some strengths that I've heard students acknowledge, particularly in terms of being forced to take courses outside of their primary focus of study. But we don't have much evidence that students are connecting the dots, so to speak, And one can understand that given that we have over 450 general education classes. So there are two overarching reasons why it's time to take a look at UIC's general education program and think hard about whether it is serving its mission at UIC, which is currently stated as to provide a foundation for the knowledge, skills, and competencies essential to becoming well-educated college graduates and citizens. The two overarching reasons are as follows. First, our general education program, which has distribution requirements across a broad array of knowledge and skills broken down into 6 categories, is very much in the mainstream, but UIC is not. We have one of the most diverse student bodies of any research university in the country, and this diversity is expressed in many ways, including race, ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status and background, disability, and even residential versus commuter students. We have no racial or ethnic majority among our student body, which therefore, as I've been saying now for 4 years, looks very much like this country is going to look in 25 years, or maybe less, fewer. This means that we are educating tomorrow's leaders, and we better make sure we are doing right by them. The second reason for taking a look at our general education program is that the faculty began to create this program back in around 2003, and the world has changed a lot since then. That was the year that Mark Zuckerberg, in his Harvard dorm room, started what would become Facebook. 2003 is also before a lot of other now basic and some would say indispensable everyday technologies, like the iPhone, apps and Fitbits, YouTube, Instagram, Google Maps, Uber, Alexa, and the mainstreaming of online education, to name just a few. Most of our incoming freshmen this year were born in 2001, so for all practical purposes to them, 9/11 is history, not lived experience. And on that note, we are now educating Generation Z, a much-studied group with quite distinct habits and predilections from millennials, not to mention Gen Zers or us aging baby boomers. So it's time to take a fresh look to see whether, in light of who our students are, the world they grew up in, the varying ways that they acquire knowledge, as well as the nature of the modern workforce, whether the current education program is serving them in the best possible way, and if not, how do we prepare them for life and work in this oh-so-complicated world that we're now living in. So to have this conversation today, we're joined by 3 distinguished speakers whom I will introduce in a moment. They will each speak for about 30 minutes about both the substance and the process of the general education revisions that they undertook at their universities. That will be followed, each one will be followed by 10 minutes of questions from the audience, and there's a mic right there. We'll then take a break at around 11:15 to get some lunch and meet back, which will be available in the next room, and then meet back at the tables to discuss questions about how we might use some of the information we learned from these presentations to begin our own process. Those questions are already on your tables. Then at around 12:30, we'll do reporting out on these questions, and I will ask our presenters to offer some feedback as they see fit. So for a little bit of housekeeping, again, I haven't gotten the coffee wave yet, but we will let you know. The bathrooms are the women to the left and the men to the right of the elevators out there. So with no further ado, I will introduce today's speakers. I'll introduce them all at once before they come up, and then they'll come up to speak in order. First, we have Dr. Melody Bowdon. She's the Associate Vice Provost for Academic Administration and the Associate Dean in the College of Undergraduate Studies and a Professor of Writing and Rhetoric at the University of Central Florida, which is a school that in many ways looks a lot like ours. Dr. Bowdon received her BA in English Language and Literature and Secondary Education from Oklahoma City University, her Master's in Composition, Rhetoric, and Literacy from the University of Oklahoma, and her PhD in Rhetoric, Composition, and the Teaching of English from the University of Arizona at Central Florida. Arizona. At Central Florida, Dr. Bowdon has served in several leadership roles, including Executive Director of the Faculty Center for Teaching and Learning, Director of the Southern Association of Colleges and School Commission on Colleges Decennial Reaffirmation of Accreditation, and Director of various graduate programs. Dr. Bowdon's current interdisciplinary research includes assessment of active learning spaces and expansion of integrative learning. Her scholarship focuses on professional communication in the government and nonprofit sectors. Dr. Bowdon has authored numerous articles and books about innovative pedagogies and institutional leadership, including one called Best Practices in Flipping the College Classroom, and another, Higher Education, Emerging Technologies, and Community Partnerships. I'm having second thoughts. I think we will have Dr. Bowdon get up now. I'll come back up and introduce each person because there's just so much to say. So I give you Dr. Melody Bowdon.
I think I got it. Exactly. It's like what our brain defaults to. Yep. I think I'm good.
Oh, and then the other thing I should tell you, since you'll be here, when it's time for your down, right around it. So press this button because I turn the volume off. It's
Okay.
You're getting other notifications.
I can do that.
You're on sabbatical right now.
Yes, I'm going to. That's easier, isn't it? Okay, thank you.
This is where you would bring me on school days
I was thinking the same thing.
Right next to his mic, so no.
I was thinking the same thing, though.
After lunch.
It's taped. There's tape all the way. I was thinking the same thing.
This will be so tempted to jump out of the box. So
Oh, I was thinking the same thing. Maybe move there.
she's
Everything's okay.
Hi. Everybody snuck out to get coffee. Okay, yours all set then.
Whatever you think. It looks like. What's that? Yes. But it's more dangerous to try and stand here talking while people need to run out and get coffee. That was how I strategized anyway.
But
Okay. All right, good morning. How's my audio here? How does it sound?
We're happy
Sound
now.
okay? What's that?
Happy now.
Okay, that's right. No
Nobody wants to speak to an angry, coffeeless mob, right?
Okay, we're going to start again. Thank you.
All right. Good morning. So, sound is okay, right? Back row? Okay, great. Good morning. It's really nice to be with you today. I will tell you, I left 90-degree weather in Orlando, and don't be angry. You got your coffee, so don't be angry. But I enjoy a little bit of a visit to winter here and there, so I will have my 24 hours, and off I will go back again this afternoon. But it's been really nice being here. So I'm looking forward to telling you today about the integrative learning model for general education at the University of Central Florida. And I'm going to start by just telling you a little bit about the university itself. And we do have a lot in common, I think, with UIC. So university is big, it's young. I jokingly said last night that the university and I are about the same age, which was adorable when I started there when I was 31 and is getting less and less cute by the year, but I'm still telling you now, it's about 52 years old. So it's very innovative. We are consistently ranked in the most innovative in the U.S. by U.S. News and World Report. So, you know, that brings a lot with it. We could talk about we have a lot of diversity at our institution. Unfortunately, we have far more of that among our students than we do among staff and faculty, which I think is a common experience, but that is something that we're really working on. We're rising and we're competitive. And when I say competitive, our institution is part of the Florida State University system, which has, to be honest, pitted the institutions against each other through metrics for performance. And so we have to be very competitive in lots of strategic ways within that, as well as, you know, just that drive for innovation and desire to continue to achieve. So we're an R1 university, one of the nation's largest by enrollment. As you can see, we had almost, whoops, you can't see because it's a secret. We have almost 70,000 students last fall, and almost 60,000 of those were undergraduates. 47.8 minority students, 24% FTIC, and so among our FTIC, in first time in college, it's pretty competitive, especially for that fall cohort. So pretty high SATs, a GPA that's above 4.0. 60% of our graduates, at least from the university, are transfer students who come in most cases, with an Associates of Arts from a feeder school. So that's a lot of our graduates, which that makes complicated the whole premise of gen ed in many ways, because a lot of the students who come through that process will not be part of our gen ed. So I can talk to you a little bit about how we're approaching that. We have strong retention and graduation rates. We are a Hispanic serving institution. And one of the things I'm most proud of at UCF is last year, not just the finalist status is what I'm proud of, but the fact that we have really closed the gap on graduation rates between our Hispanic students, our African American students, and our white students in the last few years. And so I'm very happy to share more information about the strategies that we've used to do that if anybody is interested in that. So, oops, did I get out of my house? There we go. Okay, so I wanted to tell you a little bit about the timeline. And I will say, I am shocked by how long it takes to move general education. I will tell you, too, I've done a bunch of jobs in between, including serving as interim vice provost and dean for about a year and a half in the middle. So we did have a little bit of a pause there. But basically, this is the timeline that we took for this process. The first year, I just talk to students. Now, bear in mind, I had other jobs as well, but I spent a lot of time talking with students, doing focus groups with transfer students, with FTICs, with students who had not even started at the institution, and so forth. So that was our first year. Second year, we had 6 faculty fellows who came from all across the institution, all ranks, all experiences, and we just talked over that year, spent a lot of time just talking on a regular basis on what we wanted general education to look like. And they were drawing from colleagues, and so we started that way with just a small group thinking. Then we went into the curriculum and collaboration focus, which was we spent just a year with faculty development. We involved about 80 people. Now at UCF, about 200 faculty members have taught, this is how I'm defining what I call a power user, they've taught at least 5 sections of a general education class over the past 3 years. it's somewhat arbitrary, but it felt right to me that that would be somebody who was pretty consistently involved in those conversations. Now, of course, many of those people over 3 years have taught 15 or more, but that's kind of the range that we used. And so all of those folks, about 200 of them, were invited to participate in faculty development opportunities. And we engaged more than 60 that first year. And so then we have continued with them. And so it's a semester-long program where they learn about integrative learning. They have a workshop on active learning, open educational resources, and some other things. I'd be very happy to dig into the details of that if anybody's really interested. Let's see. And then this year, we've been working on assessment, and next year it's a soft launch, and then we will really go all the way the following year. And when I say soft launch, basically everybody except for not all of our adjuncts and teaching assistants will be on board for next fall. That's going to take a little bit more of a lift, as I'm sure you can imagine. So our motivations, we started this, as I said, several years ago. Student feedback, when I first started talking to students, they didn't know what I meant when I said gen ed until I said, you know that sheet that you have to fill out, 13th grade, that's how a lot of them thought of it. So there really wasn't a sense that it was a program at all. And so, I showed them the goals, and there was not a lot of response that suggested that they felt like we were nailing that. So that was a lot of those conversations with students. We have a quality enhancement plan as part of our regional accreditation, which is we have to make a major investment in undergraduate learning. And that gave us an opportunity through our quality enhancement plan, which was related to integrative learning, to tap into some resources and to some momentum on campus. So we had a lot of challenges in student success that we're working on, including predictive analytics, other kinds of things that were involving people all across campus. And so that gave us some momentum to latch on to some of those other activities. I don't know if you have this challenge here. Assessing general education is very complicated at most institutions, and so that was one of our difficulties, was meaningful assessment. We had a model where basically every single class was assessed separately, and there was some peer review of that assessment, but it wasn't really meaningful. Again, I mentioned the kinds of faculty that we work with, and then also a drive to improve FTIC retention, although I will tell you, our FTIC retention is at almost 92%. I'm not sure we can improve a lot on that. But that sophomore retention is something that we're also, sophomore to June, that we're also looking at. So, a few things that were going on at UCF when we started this. Our GEP, I think similar to you, our GEP hadn't been looked at in something like 17 years. When I say this at UCF, people say that's not true, but the same basic, because it went through some modulations, especially largely in response to state changes. But we hadn't sat down and thought about what should general education at UCF look like in a really long time. And so a lot of people have been working on it and making updates and thinking about it, but not sitting down and doing a wholesale refresh of it. Again, we had our quality enhancement plan on integrative learning. A lot of challenges to an integrative model. First of all, we have a really complex state environment. And I know Andy's nodding because he has a similar kind of situation. The state has, there's the lore is that some legislator was jogging in Tallahassee, which is the capital of Florida, a few years ago, ran into some undergraduate, asked him, when was the Battle of 1812 or something like that. The kid didn't know it, and then all of a sudden everybody was on board with revising general education. This was kind of, that's the lore. I don't think it's completely untrue. I think there really is an incident there, but that's kind of the vibe that we get. And so then the legislators were all over it because the universities were not doing this right. And so it became this really unifying battle for the universities and our state college system, which is very, very strong, to sort of fight the legislature on taking away our ability to determine what our general education would look like. But so there is a state structure that we won, which actually is okay, we can work within it, but we do have a really, really interesting situation there. High number of transfers, as I mentioned, wide range of types of faculty teaching in the program, However, some of the things that really support this model at our institution, a strong faculty development culture. We invest a great deal, and we also place a lot of value on faculty development. Motivated and engaged faculty members, this integrative campus culture that I mentioned with all the initiatives that are going on, and then the support from high levels of administration to get this done, which you have here, of course. All right, so I want to share a little video with you that I have to say has more of myself than I want. I asked them to put some B-roll in there, but it didn't happen. Anyway, so here's a little video that lets you hear from some of my colleagues about what we're up to. And I think it will give you...
And I had to take the GEP classes like everyone.
Let's see here.
And when I think back to my undergraduate experience, and I had to take the GEP classes like everyone, I actually remember those GEP classes that were totally outside of my major to this day, probably better than even my major classes, because they were topics that, at the time I didn't know a lot about. There were topics in religion and anthropology, and in one case, the anthropology led those classes I took as the GEP class to check off a box. It ended up becoming a double major for me.
What education is supposed to do over the arc of somebody's lifetime. Like, I really do think it's about making those connections and encouraging the connections that students can make on their own, and maybe helping them see connections that they wouldn't automatically see, at least in the moment.
You have a story to tell. And so this is your major, and this is GEP, the bigger world, just like the world of the play. This is the character, but this is the world of the play. And within that world, you have to learn how to maneuver, how to make it yours. And so that's how theater is relevant.
The General Education Program Refresh at the University of Central Florida, it focuses on curriculum redesign, it focuses on making connections across courses, it has a significant component of faculty development in which faculty members are getting together, working on forging more obvious and meaningful connections across their courses. Key stakeholders include faculty, students, advisors, department chairs, and upper administration at the university. We had focus groups, we had conversations with students at multiple levels, from students who hadn't started yet at UCF to those who are about to graduate. We learned from them that UCF's general education program didn't always feel like a cohesive experience. In some ways, it just seemed like a checklist of courses. And so we've been working hard with faculty and student input to make connections across those courses so that it feels like an experience, not just a list of classes.
Among the GEP programs, most of them are introductory courses, which in my perspective are very important. They are the courses that gives young minds exposure to the new field. It gives them a platform to connect together among different disciplines, and it gives them the possibility to shape new ideas and new forms of innovation in a setting that is not possible in any specific related courses in their own disciplines.
GEP curriculum is a series of classes that are designed to complement each other. And so, for example, if you take college algebra, you'll use those skills in classes like chemistry and economics. If you take economics, we study behavior, why people do what they do, and it turns out that's important when you go and take environmental science and you think about people's impact on the environment. Economics is also important if you're taking classes like history, anthropology, sociology, because they're really all about people and why people do what they do. And so really we've picked a set of classes that are definitely interconnected with each other.
So say you don't like history. At some point in your life, probably frequently, probably in everything you're going to do, you're going to need to make arguments based on evidence. So one of the things you can learn in my class, even if you hate history, or even if you think it's not going to be relevant for you, is you can learn how to construct an argument based on valid evidence. It's a skill set that you can utilize in the remainder of your education, your academic career, and your post-graduation career. It's a skill set that you can use in conversations with your family at Thanksgiving.
The university is really trying to create this complete student, not ideal, complete student, one that's in a position to take his or her nation's society and make some meaningful contribution.
I think the most noticeable change in the general education program that's going to come out of this refresh is the ways in which the general education faculty are working together to give students a cohesive experience. And the most important thing, I think, that faculty members seem to get out of it was this feeling that, other people in this university, even if they're teaching a discipline that's completely different from mine, face the same challenges as well as have the same passion for teaching undergraduate students that I do.
In anthropology or in philosophy or in history, they have a different perspective. For example, in biology, it is more visual. So therefore, I learned a lot that their techniques that they adopt in their own disciplines, how I can transcribe those into my own field. So this is a big benefit.
Each time we walk on campus, we pass all the buildings and we go into our building. This development program allowed me to, it's almost like go to every different building and meet my peers in one place, which is wonderful.
We want students to be able to learn how those connections interrelate between the different faculty members and between themselves as students or potential employees in the future. It gives us an opportunity to kind of come out of our individual areas within the university system and to explore that as a team. So the same principles we want to model to our students, by doing this in a cohort with one another, we enable that same thinking process. We also get to look at it from the shoes of being a learner rather than an instructor.
General education provides fertile ground to start something that I believe is becoming relevant and important in today's society. How can we discuss differences of opinion on what is beautiful, but doing it through a civil discourse?
All right, so that gives you a feel for what we've been up to over the last little while. I'm happy to share with you the URL for our general education page that has this video on it, although this video isn't accessible on it just right now. There's some kind of issue with it right this minute. But we have several other videos by faculty talking more in depth about their particular areas. And so, they're really good. So I'm happy to point you to that. So I want to go back here to my PowerPoint. Let's see here. Just want to go back. I'm not sure why it won't just let me do that. Okay. And all right. So I want to show you. This is what our horrible general education program menu looks like right now. And I mean, this is the menu, right? And there are about 75 classes students can choose from. If you see, you probably can't see it here, but I'm happy again to answer questions or provide you with more information about this. But you see what the classes that have the black diamonds next to them? Those are state core courses. And those are required, there are all kinds of rules about the distribution of those state core courses. So students in many cases have to take at least one of the courses with a black diamond. Now, I'm a technical communications person. Somebody decided in terms of designing this document stuck a black diamond by it, and now we all refer to them as black diamond classes like they're ski slopes or something. It's very strange. But anyway, you know how these things work. But everyone, black diamond, the notion is that black diamond is an official state designation. It's not, it's just somebody's asterisk, basically. But that's the old program. And then this is the graphic that we are using for our new program. It's very, very difficult to make significant changes in the state program at in Florida. And so what we did was we left the same basic courses, although we will be adding courses that will be in line with this integrative model. But we asked that everyone, we worked on 5 foundations. We sort of renamed the 5 foundations of the state. So we have sort of aliases, alternatives. Now I will say we left communication, which is my foundation, the same. We've converted the concept of our science foundation to knowledge application. Interpretation and evaluation is the phrase that we use to describe what used to be the social sciences area. Mathematics is problem solving, and cultural interactions used to be called cultural and historical. So I think I'll just sort of quickly go through. I'm not actually sure what time I started. Did I start about 20 after? Yeah, you got about 10 more minutes. Perfect, okay, great. So those 5 areas are cultural interactions, understand common human themes, have an awareness of diverse cultures, and understand the cultural, historical, economic, and social implications of what they learn. So this is sort of the learning outcome for each area. Communication, become successful writers, speakers, and producers of digital materials in their academic, civic, and professional worlds. Knowledge application, understand scientific methods and connect and apply them to challenges facing society. Interpretation and evaluation, which I will tell you the faculty call this the fake news foundation. Assess and decipher information in a world full of conflicting sources. And problem solving, be well-informed citizens who can reason and apply analytical, statistical, and computational methods to the challenges of a globally diverse and technologically rich environment. That's all. So that's a lot, right? But these are non-controversial outcomes. These are very typical of most nationally. These are the kinds of things that people are trying to see their students learn. But the way that we've approached it is that every course is stuck with its state foundation because we don't have any flexibility in that. For example, psychology kind of wanted to move into the sciences. We don't get to make that call. That's a state decision. But every department that offers general education program classes was able to identify completely up to them what their secondary learning outcome would be. So that every course in our general education program has a primary, pretty obvious, and then a secondary learning outcome. So I'll just give you some examples. So American History 2020, which is, I think it's the before 1850, it's obvious. One that is necessarily stuck with is the social, and if you're a historian, we can talk about how strangely divided between cultural and historical and social history is in the state of Florida. Secondarily, though, cultural and historical, and then they have the option of adding as an individual faculty member a tertiary one, and they chose communication because they do teach so much writing in those courses. Anthropology 2511, which is it's a very basic anthropology course. Cultural and historical was the base. It's cultural anthropology. The second one, though, was knowledge of application because there's a great deal of science that goes into that course. And then problem solving because in accompaniment there's a lot of mathematical thinking. The biology class is primarily science, but also a lot of math, and they do a great deal of science writing in their biology classes. Math, I will say they've only picked 2 for this particular course. They're not jumping out there a lot, but some of the math folks are adding communication, problem solving, which is the automatic one, and the knowledge application, which is science. And then in our composition program, communication is our base one, and then cultural and historical, and evaluation and interpretation. So everyone is identifying a couple of these. And what I think was the most fun, and again, we've worked with now nearly 100 faculty members through our faculty development. On day 1, most people say, oh, I do all 5 of those in my class. I want to do all 5 of them, which, of course, is very gratifying to hear. I'm not sure students would agree with it. I'm not sure that we certainly can't assess it, but we ask them, oh, please limit yourself to 2 that you emphasize and then that we're going to assess. So, and then a tertiary is an option for individual faculty members. Is this making sense? Are you getting the feel for this? Okay. So, let's see here. So, I've kind of just skimmed over the top of how this works, but a few things I want to just underscore that are key. We did not make a radical change in our curriculum or the course list, but a change in thinking about the program. I anticipate changes in the course list moving forward very much, and I'm already seeing people say, ooh, you know, now that you mentioned and you remind me what general education is supposed to be, that class shouldn't be in gen ed, it should be this other class. And so we're seeing that just bubble out kind of organically. Folks are saying, oh, we're not putting forward the right thing. It's an integrative model, coherent student experience, streamlined and more meaningful assessment. My favorite thing, and you can see it in this video, but you can't see all of it, we have promoted the emergence of a general education community that we've never had before. I've been at UCF for 20 years. And what's wonderful is we have a meeting once a semester that invites everybody from the GEP, and we just talk about issues related to student success, issues related to the general education program, etc. Never before did most of these people think of themselves as general education faculty. They thought of themselves as physics faculty and composition faculty and so forth. But now we are really raising the profile. Did you see the medals that some people were wearing, the sort of gold? We bought those and gave them to everybody who participated in our faculty development programs. The idea is that it is an honor to be a general education faculty member, and that is how these folks feel. They're professors, they're instructors, every rank and discipline, and that has just been heartwarming. You can tell I get really excited about this. And we've done a great deal of faculty collaboration and support. We have a physicist who's like this famous NASA rocket guy working with an instructor in communication. They're exchanging coursework. So the physics students are writing about physics kinds of things, and then the writing students are critiquing that and trying to, so it's just wonderful collaborations. I could obviously go for days on that. Key elements though, student engagement, really important, and I know that's something that you're doing here at UIC, and I really commend you for that. The students have to have an opportunity to have their thoughts represented here. Faculty development, faculty leadership. My boss is just blown away by how many people have their hands in leading this, and I think she's new to campus, and I think she's surprised that this can happen. It's working very well with about 25 faculty members taking on different leadership roles. So they're not, they're small, but it's collaborative, and that's something I really want to emphasize. Supplemental programs, including we have programming now in open educational resources for general education, and we also are starting in the fall an integrative learning leaders group where we have undergraduates who are peer leading discussions about sustainability themes across general education. So we'll have one person who might be in a couple of physics classes, a couple of chemistry classes, a couple of history classes, leading conversations about the 5 levels of integrative learning that AAC&U puts in their LEAP rubrics. Again, this is stuff I'm happy to unpack a little bit more with you. But those will be just in their gen ed classes, they'll be talking about connections across across their courses, between their civic lives and their courses and so forth. Changing the culture through a reward system. These faculty meetings, we're making sure that general education is seen as valued. Branding and community buy-in. So we're doing a lot with branding on campus. Collaborating with our feeder schools. As I mentioned to you, we have many, many transfer students. So we're inviting our biggest transfer partners in to be part of our faculty development. And finally, we're trying to use technology in innovative ways, especially when it comes to assessment. So I'm going to stop there because that's a lot, I know, and see if folks have any questions.
And we have a mic right here.
Thank you for your presentation. When you talk about collaboration, is that at the level of course design, or is it also at the level of teaching, like team teaching and co-teaching courses?
So the question was, is the collaboration team teaching as well as course design? So we don't have resources, honestly, for team teaching at this point, which I think is pretty typical. I don't know about here, but that's just not something we've really got available. So this is connecting courses. It's people just working together. So it's not the same groups of students, right? It's not cohorts. So it's not, as if the same students are in the physics and the chemistry, the same set of courses. So it's faculty members are really the thread that's connecting it. Yeah, but we don't have a lot of team teaching. What else?
So
Yes.
Yes, with so many students, and so many departments, and lots of activities, what do you do to try to ensure that there's some continuity in your general education effort? So that what is general education one year is kind of like what it is the next year, or there's some continuity so that somebody comes to this and they can recognize where it's been, where it's going. It seems like you'd be fighting forces of disorder all the way along the way.
So the question was, how do we maintain continuity with so many students, so many courses, and so forth? And I think, first of all, I think one secret to it is that we only have about 75 classes in the general education program. And so there is a pretty contained range. It's a lot, but I think in most places it's much more. So we also, our assessment process is pretty good. That brings us together annually to talk about what's going on, what the learning outcomes are. That's the most basic level, I would say, is really through that assessment process. And we're shifting now to an even more meaningful assessment process where basically every general education class is going to have to use the outcomes tool, and Canvas is our learning management system. And they're going to have to use that to tag places where key learning outcomes are assessed. So it might be a test question, it might be an essay, it might be a discussion post in an online course, that kind of thing. And so I think that assessment is the place where those conversations are had. But I mean also through all this faculty development, which we're going to continue. Oh yeah.
So two quick questions, I think. The comfort issue that is amongst the faculty are connecting the dots
Yes.
between their courses.
That's right.
Okay.
So it might not be the same, it won't be the same students necessarily. But we're a critical mass because more than half of the general education faculty have been through our programming and are involved with this. And so the students are seeing the integrativeness, not in straight lines, which we kind of like actually.
And those dots are in terms of topics or in terms of just how,
So it's mostly that secondary outcome, that idea. So it's basically the idea that, hey, you're doing science in this class, but you're also doing communication, and that is connected to your this class and your that class. And the most popular secondary learning outcome is that interpretation and evaluation. I do have a list of all the secondary learning outcomes. It's kind of interesting, actually. But a lot of them have chosen that. And the point there is they're asking folks to look at how they interpret data, learn about how to assess sources and those kinds of things. So it becomes very obvious. Plus we're doing branding with the logos, that kind of thing that will give students the visual cue that, oh, this is connected to that. And these learning leaders are going to be huge. We're going to have 120 sections of courses with these learning leaders in them next year. So we'll likely catch almost all of the first year students in some course through that.
And then very, very briefly,
Yes.
you seem to connect retention and teaching strategies, teaching methodology, interactive teaching strategies and so on, and the issue of retention with this refreshing or redoing of your DNET program. So I just was interested to hear a little bit more on how you understood that those two things are going to now work together.
Great. So I'll tell you, again, based on really student affairs efforts, more than faculty efforts, just to be honest, we got to that 92% retention. And so we're piling on, to be honest with you. But we expect to see, I don't think we're going to lift much above 92, honestly. There's 8% attrition is pretty good, I think. 8% of people are just transferring to another school, that kind of thing. But the connection we see is that we hope a lot of students who are struggling with anxiety and so forth, they're going to feel more of a connection with faculty. The integrative learning is really cognitively very powerful at that stage in their development. And so we expect to be honestly icing on the cake more than really seeing a big lift from that. But my understanding, I mean, the data does suggest that integrative learning helps with retention nationally. Again, I don't see that we're going to get a big lift from it. There's one over here. And how much?
Please use the mic because we are recording this.
Oh, sorry.
It would be really helpful if you could just get up and use the mic.
At the top of your talk, you mentioned
Oh.
that you were able to close.
Can you please get up and use the mic? Right. Thank you.
Hi, thanks for your talk. At the beginning, you mentioned you were able to even out the graduation rate between a diverse group of students. One, I'd like to hear you speak to that. I know that's something my own school struggles with. And then I'm also curious how your school is defining meaningful assessment.
Okay,
Thanks.
great. So I would be very happy, actually. So my email is just melody@ucf.edu. If you want more information about the many, many programs that go into the retention and the the evening out, the graduation rates, I don't want to take credit for all of that. I helped write the application. We have lots and lots of support programs, and especially a lot of those are targeted toward specific groups of students. We have it's a very collaborative kind of model, so I'm happy to send that to you with an explanation of all of those programs. That's probably better than my belaboring it here. Meaningful assessment. So our regional accreditor asks that we think of general education as a program, so that it's a full experience that students have. And what our assessment has been historically, truthfully, has been these classes on a class-by-class basis. That's not a meaningful assessment of a program. That's a possibly meaningful assessment of a bunch of classes. So what we're doing now is two levels. So one of them is learning outcomes at the foundation level, and the second is we're studying integrativeness. So we're doing, because this is what we're doing with the program, is integrativeness. So we're actually doing surveys, which are student perception. So we've got one that's really from student learning, and then one that's more student perception, how connected their experiences were, and how what they did in their their gen ed classes connected with what they were doing outside of class and across general education. Does that make sense? So trying to really look at some basic outcomes that we're assessing across the courses as a whole, and then also looking at integrativeness. Done. And there was one more, I think. Yep.
You said something about, and maybe this was an example of the integrativeness with sustainability. Could you elaborate a little bit?
Sure. So we talked with students about if there were a theme or a concept that they would most like to see across their courses. Sustainability, hands down, one. And we at UCF define that very broadly. So any general education class could have some sustainability content in it. So what we're doing with the learning leaders next fall, and this is a pilot that we're doing, is they're going to have sustainability themes in those conversations. And we have a group of faculty members who are really invested in the sustainability topic. So it's pretty piloty at this point, but we're hoping that talking about, hey, how does your music class have to do with sustainability? How does your chemistry class? All of that will help students to really crystallize their thoughts on some of these key issues that matter very much to them. And again, we'll tie this to something that they care about. That's kind of the idea. All right. I should pause there. Thank you. Let me pull back out of all my stuff here.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Bowdon. That was very interesting. Next up is Dr. Andrew Perrin, and he's the director of the Institute for the Arts and Humanities at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and the Rule W. Tyson Professor of the Humanities and a Professor of Sociology. Dr. Perrin received his BA in Sociology and Anthropology from Swarthmore College, and his MA and PhD both in Sociology from the University of California, Berkeley. So he's got an excellent pedigree, which I like very much, because it's also mine. A cultural and political, although we were not there in the same years, we discovered, yes. A cultural and political sociologist, Dr. Perrin's current research focuses on public opinion, letters to the editor, and democratic citizenship. Dr. Perrin is the author of several papers and books, including American Democracy, From Tocqueville to Town Halls to Twitter, published in 2014. He's been a member of the University of North Carolina Chapel Hill faculty since 2001, during which time he's also served in roles such as Associate Chair of the Department of Sociology, Director of the Carolina Seminars Program, and Special Assistant to the Provost and Dean for the Accreditation and Curricular Innovation. So I give you Andy Perrin.
Hi, good morning, everyone, and thanks for the opportunity. I am delighted to be here and talk about the kind of work that we did, both process and product, in revising the general education curriculum at UNC Chapel Hill. And thank you, Susan, for the opportunity. I thought I'd begin with a little background, since I think the sort of fundamental story about higher education is heterogeneity, and that if you've met one university, you've met one university. Give you a sense of what we were working with, and then I'm going to tell you a bit about my own sort of style and background and the historical moment in which we began this process to give you a sense of how we went about it. Carolina has about 17,000 undergraduate students, and all undergraduate students at Carolina matriculate in the College of Arts and Sciences. Well, actually, it's called the General College, but it's there is no administrative unit called the General College. The College of Arts and Sciences manages the entire general education process for all students. And about 80% of students end up majoring in the College of Arts and Sciences. The other 20% major in one of our other professional schools, business, journalism, public health, nursing, pharmacy, et cetera. But about 80% are majors in the College of Arts and Sciences. And another substantial number are double majors in which one major is in the college. So the college is a very large portion of the undergraduate efforts of the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. 82% of our students are from North Carolina. That's a statutory requirement from the state of North Carolina, and so we are we have sort of two unusually different populations because so many of our students are in-state. And roughly 20% of them are low-income or first-generation students, and that's a growing number. It's a number that grew even over the course of the time we were redesigning the general education process, and it's something we were paying close attention to. Indeed, I think within the kind of undergraduate education world at UNC, the most important efforts that have been going on in the last, say, 5 to 8 years have been around what I would sort of broadly call the question of joining access and excellence. That we're obviously very proud of our faculty, very proud of the quality of our undergraduate education, and we're increasingly proud of the level of diversity that we bring in our student body. My personal concern, I'll tell you a bit about my background in a moment, my personal concern and that of many of my colleagues is that we have unwittingly produced a lot of internal inequality among our undergraduate students, so that in the beginning of my intro sociology course, I always do a survey of the first-year students in my course. And one of the questions I asked is, what age were you when you knew you were going to college? And it's a classic bimodal distribution. Some of our students knew they were going to college by the time they were in kindergarten, and the question is where they were going. And some of our students didn't know they were going to college until they were admitted to Carolina in their junior or senior year of high school. My concern is, so obviously that's something we're very proud of, but my concern is that is for internal inequality among our students. Are we directing lower income students to less intellectually demanding, more pre-professional kinds of routes, and not providing the sort of full complement that they can get from studying at a world-class research college university? And so a lot of our concern in designing particularly the first year work of the curriculum is to try to be very intentional about helping students figure out what their appropriate intellectual directions are, quite separate from kind of what they thought they were going to be doing as they entered. Carolina has a very successful program called the Carolina Covenant, which provides all students, makes sure that all students who enter from families below 200% of the poverty line graduate without debt, but beyond graduating without any debt, they are provided with a whole host of kind of intellectual academic support services that has, similarly to what Melody was talking about, has really kept graduation rates quite comparable across the Covenant cohort with the rest of the students. And there's an active sort of working group called Thrive at Carolina that we were closely connected to, which again is working on questions about how to make the kind of lofty aspirations of the university available to all students, particularly low-income first-generation students. Yeah. Okay. So, interestingly enough, the first major service I did upon arriving at UNC as an assistant professor was to join Committee S of the general education redesign process that became the Making Connections curriculum, and which took effect in 2006. And I think to some extent the process that we used was a reaction to, we were sort of fighting the last war. It's a reaction to the, I think, largely acknowledged concerns about how that process ended up, both because of its process and because of its product. The Making Connections curriculum looks a lot like the sheet that Melody showed us. It's a very long list of possible courses that students can take. They're asked simply to check them off. Many courses can fulfill 3 and even 4 general education requirements, and so the students approach it as not just box checking, but as a game. You know, how can I sort of move as quickly as possible through a disconnected list of courses? And a joke we could tell at any gathering as we worked on this process was, it's called the Making Connections curriculum, and yet students tell us that they don't make any connections whatsoever among the courses that they take. They don't understand it. They're not able to tell the story of their undergraduate education. And so I'm a sociologist. I study organizational sociology in part. And one of the things that I experienced, I told you I was in Committee S. There were 22 subcommittees of the general education redesign that became Making Connections. And the incentives for each committee were essentially to say, we need more of us. Right, so Committee S was the Social Sciences Committee, and quite predictably we said there needs to be more social science in the curriculum. That bubbled up to the Coordinating Committee, where they noticed that you can't do more of everybody. And so essentially what they did was to sort of organize a détente, a compromise among too many competing interests to create the checklist. That was, I think, widely acknowledged as a problem with the way that we organize our general education curriculum. Susan pointed out that there are 700 and something courses here that, 400 and something courses here that meet. We actually had about 3,000 courses on the books that met one or another of the general education requirements. Let me pause for a second on that and just tell you, so as Susan said, I study democracy, the sociology of democracy, deliberation across disagreement, and in particular, my particular brand of kind of democratic theory is called agonistic deliberation. So I'm interested in real disagreement and how people fight with one another. I don't particularly care about civility, and so it was important to me personally to respect and honor the extent to which people organically truly disagreed with one another, and to make the process truly a deliberative one, although we tried not to be uncivil, but we cared much more about making sure that everybody's voices were truly heard and paid attention to. And I think, quite honestly, I think we succeeded in the sense that everybody understands that that their voices had been paid attention to, even when they lost particular battles within the conversations that we had. The historical moment at which this took place was, they seem to all be this way, but a difficult moment for UNC. We had been coming off of a decade or so of no faculty raises, of declining both enrollments and faculty sizes in many of our key departments. We had a major set of scandals and controversies surrounding the academic athletics scandal in NCAA. We were confronting a major set of conflicts surrounding the Confederate statue on our front lawn, and I think it's fair to say that that faculty morale was quite low, and we wanted to be. I wanted to be very intentional about addressing that problem. Because I think sort of in a social psychological way, when faculty feel under attack, when anybody feels under attack, the natural response is a kind of conservatism that I think would have been a real threat to doing a great job of this work. And so we wanted to find ways to make sure faculty felt safe That is, that they felt that decisions made on behalf of the students wouldn't undermine the immediate needs and intellectual goals of the faculty and the departments. And we also wanted to really encourage very carefully having faculty pay attention to, having everyone pay attention to kind of broad goals of what a curriculum ought to do instead of sort of turf protection, which I think, again, is a natural mode of faculty life. And so that's the background. That's how we entered into this process. I was appointed by then Dean Kevin Guskowitz. He's now the Chancellor of the university. I was appointed by him to coordinate this process. While Susan listed a list of administrative appointments, in fact, I'm not an administrator particularly. I'm a sociologist. I've been involved in most of the controversies that have happened at UNC over the last 20 years, but mostly as a faculty advocate and a member of faculty governance, not as an administrator. Kevin asked me to chair this committee, and he appointed the other 8 members of the committee from around the College of Arts and Sciences. And that 9-member committee, over almost exactly 3 years, coordinated a process that was, I think, highly deliberative, highly conflictual, very, very engaging, and ultimately took longer than we'd hoped, but I think, and I believe, truly believe, that it produced a really exciting outcome that really fits Carolina and will do well for our students. The first and most important thing that we did in those early times, in the early part of the process, was to hold public and constituency meetings, lots of them. Some of them were, open meetings in a big room. Others of them were meetings with faculty, meeting with students, meeting with professional schools, meeting with alumni, to have big conversations. And the real question that we were asking in those meetings was, what should a general education curriculum do for our students? That did 2 things for us. One, it got us an extraordinarily long list of things that people think the general education curriculum should do. The other thing it did was to help us communicate to all those constituencies that was the intellectual register we were working on. And that's the conversations needed to be along the lines of, what do our students need from general education in order to do well? And so I think by setting that stage, the rest of the conversations that we had were conversations not at the level of, but my department is important, and instead at the level of, here's why what I teach is important, or here's how the kinds of work that I do in the classroom could contribute to students' outcomes that we care about, substantively, intellectually care about. So that, I think that first, many of us got sort of, I think, impatient with having the same conversation over and over again, but actually I think it set the stage really nicely for a next set of processes. We did work in comparison with various peer and other institutions, so we kept sort of a running list. The UNC system maintains a list of who our peer institutions are, with a list of, I think, 10 public and 5 private institutions. We maintained that list, plus some others that we sort of thought of as interesting interlocutors. And we maintained that in large part to try, not because we wanted to model after any particular university, but because we wanted to see ways other universities had engaged with these questions. I told you about the devolution process the last time, and the reason why I think organizationally that didn't work well. My goal this time was to avoid devolution, that is, to avoid just simply sending it down to lots of subcommittees, while being very inclusive. And so what we tried to do, we had 3 major releases of drafts and a bunch of little changes along the way. But 3 major releases of drafts in September 17, and again in December 17, and then the one that became Ideas in Action that's going to be implemented in November of 2018. And each time we sent these out, we made really clear that we were very much open for conversation. We wanted feedback. We wanted concerns and criticisms. And in fact, the September 2017 draft, the first draft, was extremely controversial. It was, in a certain sense, intended to be. We made it kind of an extreme version of a particular approach, so that it would generate controversy, it would generate concerns and ideas, and many of those concerns and ideas then became parts of the December 17 and then the November 2018 proposal. So I think of this as sort of sending things out into the world, gathering lots and lots of information, ideas, concerns, bringing them back, incorporating them into a process, and then and sending them back out again. The final proposal was approved by the Faculty Council in April of 2019. And along the way, there had been over 200 faculty. The College of Arts and Sciences has about 1,000 faculty. So about 200 faculty had been actively involved in one way or another in a couple of these sort of task forces or feasibility and design processes, plus honestly an uncountable number of staff, students, alumni, members of our Board of Trustees. It was very much it was what was going on campus at the time. I want to be very frank and say that it was delayed twice. It was delayed one time. The approval process was delayed. We decided there wasn't enough consensus around it. It probably would have still passed Faculty Council, but we wanted it to pass overwhelmingly and not not be just a quick, not be a tight passing. And then we delayed implementation for a year as it became clear that we needed to work more closely with each department to make sure that their courses would fit nicely. And so it will be implemented with the students arriving in the fall of 2021, and that's where we are process-wise. Let me tell you then a bit about what we did. And this diagram actually emerged from that very first set of conversations about what we want a general education curriculum to do for students. And there are actually some really interesting similarities to the diagram that Melody demonstrated. We get ideas in action from identify, discover, evaluate, and act. Right, and we wanted students to be able to identify important questions in the world, problems, issues to be dealt with, to students to be able to find ways to discover on these questions, right, to do investigation, to be actively involved in inquiry in the world, to evaluate, make judgments, consider data and evidence, even under great uncertainty, and then to be prepared to act in the world based on those judgments that they've been able to form. There's a number of things that we liked about this model and that many of our constituents liked about this model. One of them is that something like this cycle works across many disciplines, right? It's disciplinarily agnostic to ask that students be able to ask great questions, to engage evidence about those questions, to come to good judgments even when they don't have all the evidence, and then to be able to act and refine those questions. Number two, while there are ways of sort of breaking down curricula to ask what do students need to be successful in their careers, what do students need to be good citizens and leaders, and what do they need to be sort of lifelong learners, what we were trying to do was articulate an idea that these are actually the same set of goals, right? That making students into sort of generally educated people who are capable of engaging great questions with good evidence, making good judgments, and acting on them would be ways to be successful in jobs and careers, absolutely, but that also being good citizens, educating leaders, educating people to be civically engaged and to be develop an intellectual style of life, like become lifelong learners. It's all part of the same goal, and we like this model for that reason. Carolina comes quite proudly from a liberal arts foundation. As I said, about 80% of our students major in the College of Arts and Sciences. It was, I think, a truism that our approach would be a liberal arts-oriented approach. The question that we then came up to was, how do we combine that liberal arts foundation that we're proud of and we believe in with the goals of general education? And one way that we could try to do that was through sort of a tradition model. This is what the liberal arts are. We think they're important, so we'll do a liberal arts curriculum, much like the ones that might appear elsewhere. Another approach, which is sort of similar to the prior curriculum, is a devolution model, which is essentially we say, well, we trust our departments. The departments teach good courses, and we'll simply sort of aggregate the work going on in each department into a curriculum. We rejected both of these for, I think, sound intellectual and organizational reasons, and instead we asked our members, our faculty, to answer the question of why. Why should students take a particular course? Why should students take a course in a particular discipline or a particular approach? Another way of saying this is that it's about what is it about the liberal arts that make them a strong foundation for students in those multiple different roles that we anticipate them fulfilling. And the answer that we came up with is this concept of capacities, and capacities organize much of the ideas in action curriculum. We think of capacities as ways of thinking and doing that can be used across multiple domains. So therefore, they are not, emphatically, not just skills. They're not simply the ability to do a particular thing in a particular domain, but they're portable. You can think about it as sort of intellectually portable skills. They're ways of thinking, ways of approaching the world that students could use in multiple different kinds of intellectual and practical domains. Emphatically, they are also not course topics. We don't want students taking courses that are titled, say, analysis of evidence. We want them taking courses that have substantial, serious liberal arts content through which they develop intellectual capacities. And so we think this is the link between our commitment to the liberal arts and our commitment to doing things focused on what students need in terms of their education instead of what faculty like to teach. So we think about this essentially as reasons why students should take this course. And another way of saying this is why students who are not majoring in that department should take this particular course. And they really help students as well to understand the curriculum coherently, to be able to tell the story of why they took this particular set of courses. We root this in a couple of key ideas in the research on student learning. Paying close attention to our changing student body. I think we are behind Central Florida. We're behind UIC in terms of the student mix, but we are moving much more to a more highly diverse, more economically diverse student body and wanted to pay attention to that. I told you about the Thrive at Carolina project, which is a coalition of folks in student services, the College of Arts and Sciences, admissions, counseling and psychological services, and so on, working on how to make sure all students thrive intellectually. We were looking at questions that we called FAR transfer, which comes from the literature in the schools of education. I suspect some of you are in that field. But we're trying to find the ways that what students learn in one domain, they can apply in a far away domain. They can transfer knowledge and skills that they've learned in one place far away. And one of the ways that we try to do that is through recurrence, through trying to make it such that students encounter some of the same capacities at several different points along the time in their curriculum, so that they can see the same skills a couple of times. And we do that also, as well through a set of high impact practices I'll tell you about in a moment. All right, so where did we end up? As I told you, we delayed it a couple of times, but it will be implemented in the fall of 2021. We did a couple of things. The first real pillar of the new curriculum is a renewed emphasis on the first year. We do have a number of transfer students, but nothing like the numbers of transfer students that Melody was talking about, so we can count on most of our students spending their full 4 years at Carolina. We have a very successful first-year seminar program. First-year seminars are faculty-taught small courses in particular areas that are quirky or research-oriented. Just to give you a sense of them, I teach two. One of them is called Citizenship and Society in the United States. It's about democratic theory and practice. I teach another one called Difficult Dialogues, which is about how to have conversations across major difference. Our former Chancellor, James Measer, still teaches one on the physics of music, right? These are sort of exciting, quirky courses taught by faculty members. They're small, which means they're expensive, and so this is one of the line items in the curriculum. About 65% of incoming students were taking them already. We simply made them required of all first-year students. We have some good data that suggests that the students who weren't taking them were precisely the students who could really use them. The low-income students, the first-generation students who saw them either as a distraction or even they saw them as scary. because they felt they would be exposed in these courses. And so we made that required. The first year launch is a minor thing. I can tell you about it if you're interested, but it's essentially the same thing. We made some modifications too, but we have a really successful composition rhetoric course called Writing at the Research University. It's very evidence-based, very successful. We left it mostly as it is. We've done a little work to tie it with the other courses students are taking, but basically we've left it as it is. My favorite piece of the whole curriculum is actually this course called the III, Ideas, Information, and Inquiry. These are large courses taught by teams of 3 faculty members from 3 very substantially different areas, focuses, or disciplines. It's not administratively different, it's about substantive difference between these 3. And they teach on some particular theme from 3 different areas. During these courses, students also develop some data literacy that are related specifically to the content of that big course. And they're getting some foundational skills that they will then pick up again later. This is the recurrence idea. Pick up again later as they work on communication, in collaboration, data analysis, and global engagement. That's the last piece. So each III course has to engage those kinds of capacities at a foundational level. And I'll tell you about some of those courses later on. Finally, we also created or really expanded a course called College Thriving. That course is located in our School of Education, but it's taught by a combination of faculty, graduate students, and student services staff from across the university. And it's designed to help students both understand how they learn and what they want to get out of college, how they can most effectively engage the full research university, and also provide what we called last night adulting skills. One of the things we heard from a huge number of constituencies is that many students in particular, but also parents and alumni, want us to provide some of these foundational skills and things like mental health, sexual wellness, sexual assault, alcohol and drug abuse, financial literacy, that they wanted us to provide these in ways that go beyond a kind of single workshop through student services. And so that sort of fits together in this course called College Thriving. Okay. The first pillar is that first year. The second pillar is what we call focus capacities, and these map in some ways directly into what Melody was talking about at Central Florida. The focus capacities answer that question of why students should take a given course. And emphatically, none of them is required to be in any particular department or school. Any department or school can offer these as long as they meet a fairly rigorous set of actual criteria for what's in that course. One of the biggest battles has been departments are used to offering courses that meet 3 or even 4 of these requirements. We are asking that the vast majority of the courses meet only 1 because those requirements are quite stringent. Courses that they can go up to 2 as long as they actually fully meet the full set of requirements for both of these areas. These areas are aesthetic and interpretive analysis, creative expression, practice, and production, engagement with the human past, ethical and civic values, global understanding and engagement, natural scientific investigation, power, difference, and equality, quantitative reasoning, and ways of knowing. In addition, so these are 9 courses that students need to take. They can be in the major, they can be out of the major. There's no requirement that these be taken in a sort of separate organization. And one focus capacity class has to carry an additional credit, which is an empirical investigation lab. Again, this need not be a science lab. It can be a social scientific lab in which empirical investigation is done. It can be digital humanities in which empirical investigation is done, but it needs to carry this additional empirical investigation laboratory. This is what I was saying about the stringent requirements. All focus capacity courses have to do a couple things that make them, this is sort of Melody used very similar language to what we use, which is it's a privilege to be in the general education curriculum. And so we want these courses to be focused on what students need to get out of them and not just a sort of generic course. So All the courses need to pose problems and questions that require systematic thinking about evidence, argument, and uncertainty. They need to consider content in the context of human difference between and within societies, as well as in the full range of legitimate debate within the field and or change over time. And they need to require writing totaling at least 10 pages in length or the intellectual equivalent. The intellectual equivalent piece is inside baseball, but essentially writing totaling at least 10 pages in length. Presentation of material to class or smaller groups or the public through oral presentations, web pages, or other means that enable corroboration of fact and argument, and collaboration in pairs or groups to learn, design, solve, create, build, research, or similar. So we're asking these courses to be different, essentially to be more than maybe a standard introductory course. Then so the first pillar is that first year. The second pillar is the organization according to focus capacities. The third pillar is work to intentionally have students integrate and reflect upon their intellectual experiences. All students will have a research and discovery experience, which can be independent mentored research, but can also be, we have a set of various kinds of courses in which students progress through a research project over the course of the semester. Students will have some other high-impact experience, so I can tell you the specifics if you want, but the idea essentially is engagement with the community or engagement with research in some way. They'll take a junior or senior level course called Communication Beyond Carolina, in which students use the material they've learned both in general education and in some of their major work to work on communication to diverse audiences, different kinds of audiences. And then all students need to engage in something called a campus life experience. That's a fancy way of saying they need to, for every semester that they are in residence on campus, they need to attend at least 2 events that are outside the curriculum. So they can be plays, artistic events, they can be academic lectures, they can be political talks, but we want students to participate in the life of campus for the times that they're actually there. For students who are transferring in or who are on study abroad, obviously they're not liable for those. We think that this has produced, it's certainly produced a very popular outcome. It did eventually pass faculty council, not just pass, but unanimously passed faculty council. It's been very popular, I think, with the constituents, all of our different constituencies. It provides some really important outcomes, including it's coherent and student-focused. Students can tell the story of where they've been. It provides equity and through navigation, makes it a much less complicated system. It aligns with our public missions and goals, integrates those multiple goals of career, citizenship, and lifelong learning, and it is disciplinarily agnostic. That is, it doesn't ask us to make to pick winners among the 44 departments in the College of Arts and Sciences or the other professional schools around campus. I want to leave you just by telling you we have piloted a number of the pieces of this, including the College Thriving course, the first-year seminars and first-year launches, have been piloted over the last couple of years. The III courses, which I think are the riskiest but also maybe the most exciting of these courses, these are the ones that have already been taught, and they've been super popular both with our students and with our faculty, the opportunity to teach these. The ones that have happened thus far are Death and Dying, which brings in faculty from anthropology, American studies, and biology. Environment, intersectionality, and science fiction, which I think is linguistics, German studies, and geography. Philosophy, politics, and economics is self-explanatory who the faculty are. Happiness and well-being, which I always like to pair with Death and Dying, taught by a sociologist, psychologist, and exercise and sports science scholar. The idea of race, which is linguistics, biology, and AAAD, African American Studies. Gender, which is law, psychology, and art history. How Not to Be Fooled is maybe my favorite course title, but I'm not going to get the whole list of folks who are in it. It's economics, journalism, I'm forgetting who the last person is, data science and law, and then experiencing Latin America. There's more in development. We hope to, eventually there will be about 35 of these on the books, of which about 20 will be taught in any given academic year. Thanks so much. I'd love to take your questions and thoughts.
I just had a question. In the beginning, you talked about a diverse set of faculty that were brought together, but you also said only arts and sciences faculty. So didn't that leave out, engineering, design, urban planning? The list would go on and on and on.
Yeah, great question. There's a lot of different pieces to answer. We don't have an engineering school or a design school, and our city planning at UNC is a department in the College of Arts and Sciences, so the specific questions you asked were not issues. By tradition and by sort of organizational reality, the College of Arts and Sciences owns the general education curriculum. One of the things we did, however, in this case was explicitly to remove that requirement. And so each of these conversations and task forces and so on involve people from the professional schools as well. And one of the things that we did explicitly was to say, a course does not need to be taught in the College of Arts and Sciences in order to meet this set of criteria. So our nursing school, for example, is very interested in teaching courses in the general education curriculum. And we said, that's great, no problem, which is a new thing for UNC. The trade-off, though, is that in part for accreditation reasons, the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools doesn't like general education that is organized around preparation for a particular major. But in part for good intellectual reasons, we want those courses to be taught in a way that are not that is not focused on the pre-professional angle. So if the School of Nursing, one of the courses they're looking at teaching is a course in medical ethics, right, that could meet general education requirements from a nursing perspective, we're thrilled to have that part of the curriculum.
Is that decision made by the arts and sciences faculty, or?
There's we created, through the proposal, we created something called the General Education Oversight Committee, which is, because of the organizational structure of UNC, it's within the College of Arts and Sciences, but it has representation from all of the professional schools that teach undergraduates. And so that committee makes those decisions as to the criteria for, whether a given course meets the criteria for Gen Ed.
I should preface what I'm about to say I'm a curriculum developer primarily. So what you've described, in my mind, applies not only to general education, but to good curriculum, no matter what discipline you're teaching. Mm-hmm. And coming from a curriculum that is a professional program, a health professions program, which you also have on your campus, I could map out our whole curriculum on this schema, beginning with a broader audience, maybe students from other majors and whatever in the courses. But these same principles and these same crossing and the same integration goes on in our whole curriculum, with the point being to create an educated citizen. And students who go on then to graduate education or to practice, of course, continue to be lifelong learners, and they revisit these themes. I like the far out business, that they revisit these themes over and over again, and they recognize that they have been prepared to think about them. So while we're talking about general education, the first year introduction to these things, in my mind, these are principles to live by for good curriculum, period.
Thank you.
Two quick questions, and thank you very much. It's really interesting stuff. One is two of the big proposals, the freshman seminars and the III classes, which seem to animate you the most. They're very expensive classes. So I'm just curious what kind of compromises the faculty had to make, because the faculty, sure, let's do all these expensive classes, but how did that work with the administration, especially in a state like North Carolina where higher education's embattled for the last 10 or 15 years? And then the second question is just a really quick one on who teaches the wellness classes. Is that faculty or is it student services, and how does that work?
Sure. So I do like to point out that although now I direct a center, the Institute for the Arts and Humanities, I'm not actually an administrator, and I'm tempted to tell well, there's this old joke that you've probably already heard before, but President Wilson is sitting in his office trying to figure out what to do about the U-boats. They keep, sinking our ships, and nobody in the cabinet knows what to do. Finally, the sort of nerdy science advisor raises his hand and says, Mr. President, I've got the solution. What we need to do is raise the temperature of the oceans to the boiling point, and then the U-boats will just float to the surface, and we'll have no problem picking them off. The president says, well, how are we going to do that? The science advisor says, well, Mr. President, I only deal in policy and not in implementation. So I am tempted to kind of take that cop out. That said, we were told very explicitly by the dean that he didn't want us to be paying close attention to administrative questions, including expense. And that he was confident that we could raise or find the money to make some significant innovative changes. So we were asked to do this in something of an administrative vacuum. And he's come through on that. Now he's the chancellor, so he's even more positioned to follow through on that. The first year seminars are expensive. They're small courses taught by faculty members. There's no way getting around that they're expensive. Because of their historical origins at UNC, there's an endowment for them that pays for some of that expense. And the college has committed to essentially reimbursing departments for at least some of the sort of added expense of organizing them. Many faculty lines were also paid for by the creation of this program about 25 years ago. And so departments have an obligation to teach a certain number of first-year seminars, so that's sort of baked into the process. But increasing those by about a third is an expensive piece of the curriculum, there's no question. The III courses are actually not all that expensive, at least from the perspective of our College of Arts and Sciences. They're courses that are going to be between 200 and 250 students, and we have lots of folks in the teaching and learning world that have done really innovative work on how to teach in very large courses and how to make those interactive, engaging, active courses. And there are 3 faculty members teaching them. So for us, an 80 student class outside of the hard sciences and economics is actually a large class. And even in the hard sciences and economics, it's not crazy, right? So the III courses, while there's a modest investment in them, are not super expensive. Interestingly enough, on the development side of things, the III courses are raising enormous amounts of money. Our alumni love them. They think they're super exciting. And so we're actually bringing in money through development channels that we're going to probably end up using for subsidizing the first-year seminars and the college thriving classes because they're so popular with alumni. Who's teaching the wellness classes? That's something of an open question. They've been piloted over the last couple of years with a couple of different models. And my understanding, again, I'm not involved in the implementation part of this, but my understanding is that they're still kind of figuring out what the right answer to that is. The team that's involved in them is faculty in the School of Education, graduate students in the School of Education and elsewhere on campus, and student services staff and student well-being staff. My guess will be that we'll probably end up being led by one person but bringing in resources from the different pieces, but I don't actually know where that ends up.
So let's thank Andy for his presentation. Well, I didn't know anything about the endowment for gen ed classes, but I guess we'll get to work on that. Okay, and then last but not least is Dr. David Reingold, and he's the Justin S. Morrill Dean of the College of Liberal Arts at Purdue University. Dr. Reingold received his BA in sociology from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and his master's and PhD in sociology from the University of Chicago, and he's a native of Chicago. His primary teaching and research areas include urban poverty, economic development, social welfare policy, low-income housing policy, civil society, and government performance. Prior to his appointment as Dean of Liberal Arts at Purdue in 2015, Dr. Reingold was Executive Associate Dean and Professor in the School of Public and Environmental Affairs at Indiana University, Bloomington, sorry. Bloomingdale's would have been better, yeah. Okay, Dr. Reingold, please join us.
Good morning, and thank you, Provost Poser, for the invitation to be here. It's always a delight for me to come back to my hometown, and I grew up in Hyde Park, not that far from here, and I still sort of consider Chicago home. Although I have a hard time finding my way around this part of the city. It's just changed so much. All right, so I am going to share with you a bit about the sort of the Purdue story, which, by way of background, let me just say a few words about Purdue, about our university core curriculum environment, sort of where the College of Liberal Arts sort of ends up fitting into this story, and then I'll try and run through some of the efforts that we've been pushing and advancing over the past 3 years. So Purdue University, the land-grant University of Indiana, a founding member of the Big Ten. It is a member of the Association of American Universities, principally known in many ways for its engineering program, one of the largest, I think, if not the largest engineering program in the world in terms of its student size, and but is a comprehensive university and offers programs up and down the line around, whether it's in the sciences, the humanities, and the arts. And the campus is organized, sort of give a little bit of sense, into 10 colleges, all right? There are about five larger colleges in terms of faculty student composition, and then 5 colleges that are slightly smaller. The colleges historically have been they've been these fiefdoms, where essentially the deans were responsible. There very little coordination at the campus level historically around educational programming. So you had a new educational degree and you wanted to advance it, and this all predates me. I came to Purdue in 2015. If you wanted to advance an undergraduate major or a program, it essentially went through the college's protocols, was approved there, was shipped to the provost's office. Provost would sort of try and feel around, and that's actually while we had a provost. The provost role is a relatively new role for the university over the past 25, 30 years, and then it would be endorsed and advanced. There was no curriculum committee that spanned the campus to just figure out whether or not this made sense. There was so there's a lot of siloing and a lot of independent actions. There was no core curriculum for the campus before about 2010, when I'm told we had a visit from the Higher Learning Commission, our accreditors, and when they showed up, they wanted to know, like many accreditors do, how do you know that your undergraduates are learning anything? Which is, of course, the canonical question that many of us sort of ask if you've been in the higher education space. And as a result of that, my understanding of that visit was that the campus decided, well, in order to be able to answer that question in a convincing way, we need a university core curriculum. And between about 2011, 2012, or in that period, went about trying to create one. And so now it was sort of adopted around 2012, 2013. It's called the University Core Curriculum. It is a program which is very similar to, I think, what you'd find at many of the large comprehensive public research universities in America. The titles are different, and the sort of the composition of classes are a little bit different. But we've got our, I think we've got a human cultures category and behavioral and social sciences. There's a humanities human cultures bucket. There's an information literacy bucket of classes. There's a bucket of classes around quantitative reasoning, another one around science and natural science inquiry, and then there's the science, technology, and society bucket, and then the two that are mostly present in my world, which is an oral communication bucket and a written communication bucket. And students have to, like many students do, have to take classes in each of these areas to fulfill the general requirements for their degree. Now, the challenge that I think the university, well, and my college in particular, faced as this program was being implemented was that it was potentially having some funny consequences. All right, in terms of the educational experiences that people were actually having, and those were bumping up against some global trends in general about where students were sort of interested in pursuing their educational passions and interests, but they were also bumping up against some of the expectations, I think, that the leadership of the university, including one of my bosses, President Daniels, as well as our Board of Trustees, had in terms of what it was that students should be actually experiencing. And I should say, just as a context, we have about 30,000 undergraduate students on the West Lafayette campus, with another 15,000 or so graduate students. We have about 20% of our students are around 20% are first generation students, so fairly significant percentage, although not quite as significant as here at UIC. And we also have about 60% of our students are graduating in STEM degrees. Now, we're very proud of the STEM sort of focus of Purdue. I'm always I'm mindful that I'm being recorded, and you never know who's watching. But many of the great research universities in America are STEM-centric universities. We're at 60% graduates in the STEM domains. Berkeley, I think, is at 57, 58%. You've got Michigan, which is at, I think, 56%. So when you look at around the universe of sort of the really powerhouse universities in America, particularly the large public comprehensive research universities, they are largely very STEM-centric, and that is true of Purdue. So so when I got to Purdue, one of my charges, and it was announced by the president, it was sort of part of my arrival, was that I was going to be working with a new provost to try and address and revisit some of the general education environment that we were facing. And part of the reason why I was being asked to do this was because of certain trends I'm going to show you. And now a little bit about my background, which I think might set the stage also. So I came from I was mentioned, a sociologist. Spent most of my training in a very sort of traditional setting. Went and moved to a professional school of public policy, where I spent about 18 years, and in a campus, which is IU Bloomington, which is one of the founders of the decentralized budgeting, RCM type of budgeting models, and we were in the school I was in when I started. We had about 2%, 1.5% of the credit hours when I became the campus dean for SPIA. It's called the O'Neill School after Paul O'Neill. But when I left, we were at about 8.5%, 9% of the credit hours on the campus, and we're very successful at expanding the place through an RCM approach. When I arrived at Purdue is a very centralized budgeting environment, a historic-based budgeting setting. Everybody sort of gets what they got from last year's allocations, and then there are some adjustments at the margins. All right, and it reminds me a lot of my time in public life trying to negotiate with congressional appropriators in these centralized budgeting environments. Very, very similar kind of setting. So the environment that I sort of landed into was this, as far as the majors that were in this college. It was like a ball rolling off the table. It had lost about 40% of its majors in 4 years. And if you trended this out by 2025, which we're now in 2020, this college would have no students. All right. Now, what's interesting about this is that the general education program, the university core curriculum that Purdue adopts, it goes into effect in 2012. 2011, 2012, and there's a lot of hypotheses. It's I'm a sort of causal inference guy, and I've never been able to sort of actually get anybody to sit down and sort of work with me on a serious sort of study of whether or not the introduction of the university core curriculum was driving some of these patterns. But these events are happening sort of at the same time. So there's definitely a correlation. As far as new beginners, our new beginners are also these are sort of freshmen who are first-year students who are starting in this college, and we're responsible in my college for all the humanities, social sciences, and the arts. We have about 300 tenure-track faculty, and across 10 departments and schools, and in the Big Ten. About half the Big Ten has a unified arts and sciences model, and about half the Big Ten does not. All right, so we are one where the 6-7 departments in the basic sciences sit over in a college of science. All right, and between the two of us, I should say, we deliver about half the credit hours on this campus. All right, which is actually pretty similar to what you'd find in many of our peer institutions in the Big Ten, whether it's a unified arts and sciences model or not. And we have about half the faculty across the two on the campus across those two colleges. So we're walking into this environment where the credit hours on this, and both credit hours and the credit hour loss, it's about 30,000 in my college, about 30,000 credit hours per year during this time period. Also, the trend line looks dismal. All right. Now, the other piece of this that is happening is not only are students not coming to study these topics, but they're also not even coming to show up to any of these classes. And so, one of the metrics that we track, and that I track with the president and the board of trustees, is the percentage of the numbers and percentage of students graduating from the university who have taken a single class, just a single class, not a minor, not a major, just a single class in a variety of categories. And you can see here that 9 out of 10 students walked across the podium in 2016, not having had a single literature class. Similar rates around history, similar rates in slightly higher rates in economics, but some comparable rates, a little bit higher in philosophy. So essentially what's sort of happening during this time period on this campus, and I think this is obviously a national trend, although it's a little more extreme at Purdue, but I think if you sort of actually dug into this, you'd sort of see very similar patterns. We're a little bit more exposed on this because in a lot of arts and sciences colleges, you've got computer science, you've got new data science programs, you've got certain programs that are essentially masking a lot of what's happening to this sort of flight from the humanities and the social sciences and sort of some of the traditional areas that have historically been linked to general education. And so my assignment was to figure out how we were going to change this. And how are we going to do it quickly? Because I work for the president of Purdue University. One of the reasons why I went to Purdue University was I wanted to work with Mitch Daniels, former governor of the state of Indiana, director of the Office of Management and Budget. This is a person who I would say does not operate on a traditional academic timeline. All right, and our board of trustees at Purdue University, I think, have similar expectations that we are going to act with a sense of urgency and address issues as they come. So there are now, if you were to look and ask our colleagues around the campus, is this a problem? So if we went to our friends in engineering, is it a problem? Or in our friends in agriculture or in pharmacy, or I can go on. Are these issues a problem? I think they would very kindly say, yes, we really would like to have our students take classes in literature and history and philosophy and the social sciences and the like, but certainly not at the expense of the curriculum that is within their major areas of study. And at the same time, many of these areas, and I'm very familiar with this, are very competent and capable of actually introducing lots of courses in domains that sit parallel to what the college that I'm responsible for had historically done, and do it very well. So how to confront this dilemma? Well, what we ended up with, and I'm going to sort of so the takeaways here: we got falling enrollments, we've got very few students taking these help classes. So the president of the university, we have a freshman induction ceremony for every year starting in 2016. The president would get up in front of them and say, "Look, help yourself. Take a class in history, economics, literature, or philosophy." We had a big public sort of messaging campaign happening, trying to get more students in these classes. And what was over time, what was happening is that this College of Liberal Arts was essentially becoming disconnected from the rest of the enterprise, and it was unclear, whether or not what its fate was going to be. All right, so our strategy is something called Cornerstone. All right, which is, I'm going to call it a core within a core strategy. And I'm mindful, a lot of what you're hearing today, and a lot of, I think, what happens in general education, really, I would encourage you to sort of think about these things as being institution specific, because, every sort of institution of higher education is approaching these questions with a history, and with certain timing elements that are unique to your institution. And I think you have to be very mindful of those, because if you just simply sort of look at this and go, well, we like this and we don't like that, and we're just going to sort of try and adopt this in whole in one way or another, I think you're probably going to find yourself not where you want to be. So the trick is to sort of try and figure out how to understand your environment and to approach it within the historical context that you're dealing with. So this core within a core strategy. So I knew from the get-go on this that that might be telling me something, that the hook is coming and I should get ready to be done. But I promise you I won't make this too long. The university had just adopted 3 years before I signed with given this assignment a university core curriculum, and it had never had one before. So the idea that and I have to tell you that if you talk to people about sort of the compromises that are made on these and the sort of the tough and challenging sort of organizational environments, trying to sort of actually restart that rewind, that just was not going to be, that was not an option. All right, that just was, it was there. Most faculty, were at least accepting of it. It's governed by our university faculty senate, and it is what it is. And so the idea of sort of starting over, that was not in the cards. And starting over would have meant me slogging along at this, and us slogging along at it for maybe 3, 4, 5 years, having to go to the president of the university and the board of trustees trying to explain, why we're on this pace, and that was just not going to be in the cards. So so this core within a core strategy is essentially to sort of say, look, what we're going to do is we're going to focus on the two pillars, and I'll borrow that word, the two pillars around oral and written communication that every student at Purdue University is required to take, okay? And we're going to sort of engage in an exercise to try and reimagine that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take the existing constellation of about 275 classes that are spread across these buckets that I mentioned, and those categories vary from institution to institution, although I think a lot of the buckets, some people have much better, more compelling language than others, but at the end of the day, it's sort of, a vegetable is a vegetable, and a grain is a grain. I mean, you sort of end up in a place where these things end up feeling very similar. We're going to hold on to that, but what we're going to do is we're going to start to curate those courses into themed areas, and we're going to actually start to instruct students on how they can satisfy about 60 to 75, 80% of their university core curriculum requirements through our role as faculty members by saying, hey, if you're an engineering student, here are a cluster of classes in history, philosophy, literature, and the social sciences, sociology, political science, economics, and et cetera, that align with and will build off of your interests as an aerospace engineer. If you're an agriculture student and you're interested in food production, feeding the world, and the like, here are a comparable set of classes. They're already on the books, all right? And if you're interested in health and medicine, again, we have a lot of allied health programs on the campus. We did the same, and we're going to sort of bookend it with these courses that are what we call transformative text courses that are faculty taught, where students are going to read some of the more interesting material that's been produced in the course of human history, and work on their writing and their public speaking skills with a faculty member. So what we ended up with was a certificate program, all right? It's a 15 credit hour certificate program that students get if they complete the 15 hours. They do, it's designed for all students, although the target, the focus are non-liberal arts students, right? This is about how are we going to sort of touch the rest of the campus, and we're gonna make a run at it. So the first year are what we call these SCLA 101, 102 classes, these transformative text classes. And I can talk a little bit about sort of how we got here on this. We ended up with a group of about 50 faculty members, it's growing, that are part of this sort of general education community that are involved in teaching these classes right now. And we, through the brilliant work of Melinda Zook, a professor of history and a sort of advisory faculty governing board, we identified, and we were pretty sort of I think flexible on this, about 200 texts that are sort of represent some of the more compelling, interesting work that's been produced in the course of human history. Some of it's the Western canon, but much of it is not. And faculty members can advance works onto this. Half of the reading assignments in these courses have to come from that common sort of set of parameters of text, and half can come from their own sort of areas of expertise in their own domain. And those classes, they are modeled, and I'm mindful this is something that lots of universities have done. Columbia University has done this for many years, about 110 to be exact. There are, the University of Chicago has its version. There are many elite private institutions that have this kind of approach. They are probably a little bit more, others, Yale has its approach, although it's, they've never been able to agree on a common set of texts. At the other end, Columbia sort of has, I think, a much more restrictive set of texts, and Chicago does as well. We've sort of found, I think, a middle ground. But one of the things that we're mindful of is that if you look at large public research universities, nobody's been able to sort of do this at scale. For students who are frequently, the first in their family to go to college, maybe they're the second generation to go to college, they are excited, they are inquisitive, but one of the things that has happened in large public research universities over the years is sort of walking away from that tradition or that those sets of practices, even though they have served, I think, many very prominent institutions very well, and many students in those institutions very well, and so we're sort of trying to bring that into this kind of context. So with that, we've been at this now. We're in our third year of standing up this certificate, and what that really means for us is standing it up in a way that is around this first year sequence, because what's sort of behind it already we've been offering, all right, and it's there, and it's a matter of sort of curating it and offering it in a sort of, and putting it together for students in a thoughtful way so that they're not sitting there looking at a list of 120 classes saying, what am I going to take? We're basically telling them, here's what, as faculty, here's what we think you should take if this is how you want to pursue your education. All right, so we're sort of reasserting our role in this for better or worse. All right, so we have 5 themes. These themes are largely designed to try and align with the rest of the campus, and I'm mindful when we sort of set about this. I was very clear with the sort of the task force of department heads and chairs and some faculty that I appointed in 2016 to sort of move us forward on this. That the themes, if we end up with, if these themes are the same themes in 20 years, or even in 10 years, we probably haven't done our job. But this is sort of a starting point, and some of these themes may fall flat, and we should just walk away from them. Others we should add to them. So we're sort of in this 2.5 years into it. We're sort of in that stage of sort of asking ourselves and asking others, because this has really come from one college, starting to ask other colleges to be a part of this sort of, I guess what we're sort of trying to refer to as a bit of a revival of the humanities and the social sciences at large research universities. Because I'm very mindful that, without students, and I mean this seriously, without students, it's very hard to justify various parts of university life, all right, particularly at large public research universities. Very hard. All right, so if you look at sort of how we have sort of made progress on the rollout of this. So you sort of see 2017, which is sort of a pilot year for us of the first year, on the first year sequence of WC is written communication, OC is oral communication, these classes, just so you know, represent about 10% of all credit hours on the West Lafayette campus. So it is a significant sort of, we put in a lot of time and effort, and we ask a lot of our students in terms of their time and effort around those 2 buckets. And my college, and I know with some of the other presenters, we have held a monopoly on those classes. Nobody else on the campus delivers those classes, and then, as far as I can tell, nobody wants to. And we delivered them historically. I can describe how they were delivered, but we have shifted on the written communication side to about half of all of the first year offerings are in the Cornerstone model, and we're at about 40%. Or about 35% on the oral communication side. Now that's within a 2-year. We've sort of transitioned about 5% of all the credit hours through this initiative. And our early sort of indicators are positive. They're not perfect. They're positive. Now, one of the things that we're starting to do. Well, let me sort of go on a little bit in terms of sort of where are these students coming from, and they can choose. We've sort of set up a competitive environment within our own college, so students can choose of where do they want to be, and you can see this is sort of the distribution from this fall in the transformative text sequence in terms of where these students are coming from. This tail goes on and on and on. These are sort of the top 10 destinations. You can see, so engineering has a big partner. Engineering has basically said that, we want our students in these classes. This is where we think they should be. This is what we're interested in, and they are pushing their students in this direction. The Purdue Polytechnic Institute, which is a sort of an applied engineer. We have 2 or 3 of everything on the science side at Purdue. Sort of an applied engineering college. It's also the place where we have our School of Aviation. I mean, one of the reasons why we have so many astronauts at Purdue, which I think it's it's the cradle of astronauts. I think we have more astronauts at Purdue than any place but the military academies. And one of the reasons is we have a flight school combined with an astro program that allows people to prepare themselves in a variety of ways. So that you can sort of see where these students are coming from. So we were up to about 4,000 seats in that first year. So, the question is should we just push even further? And right now we're sort of we're taking a pause on some further expansion. But as the campus grows and we're growing, those margins are increasing. You can see here in terms of the number of certificate pursuers, and nobody has to actually at Purdue declare a certificate. So this is an interesting, it's like a minor, although it's a certificate is actually a credential that people get. So it actually counts as an enrollee. But we've got over 500 students right now saying we're planning to do the certificate. That's in a year and a half. We're going to see that grow in each of these years that we're expanding. This gives a little bit more about sort of some enrollment background of the college. So let me just here. I'm going to cruise through this. So in the interest of time, so a few things in terms of advice or thoughts on this. So, I think you've heard from all of us. I'll sort of re-emphasize that building a team is important. You got to find, and it's not just a team of faculty. It's a team of skilled administrators. So, my father was a mathematician, and sort of he never saw me sort of serve as a dean. I'm not quite sure what he would think about it, but having people who are effective at getting curriculum through a process. At the granular level is critical, and I think there were several moments along the way that were sort of divine intervention, or felt like divine intervention in terms of our ability to get certain proposals through various curriculum procedures, both within my college and then at the campus level, and these are really. It's like moving legislation in Congress. It can be very, very difficult. And having the skill to do it, you got to have the right people around to be able to do it. Challenges. My experience, challenges often evolve over time with many contributing factors. So, the environment that we faced sort of had a number of causes, and the way that we've responded sort of aligned with those. Sometimes, we're in the city of Chicago, so to quote our former mayor, Rahm Emanuel, never let a good crisis go to waste. Sometimes when times are tough, you can maybe get certain things done. Big problems generally require sort of multifaceted solutions. Again, it's I think a truism, and I'd say be prepared to be in this for the long haul. I mean, this is this is the kind of thing, if you're serious about it, and it's Andy sort of mentioned about implementation. In many ways, the implementation of these things is where you really have to sort of endure the challenges. And I will say one of the things that we have done to try and move this along is, and this is a controversial decision, but it was one that I thought we needed to make, was right now we're not hiring new faculty in my college unless we can agree, unless a chair or head can agree that half of their teaching assignment is in that first year. So we are basically sort of continuing to build out the capability of this by saying part of the role of a faculty member coming to Purdue University in these domains is being a part of this. And interestingly, it's been a big selling point in terms of our faculty recruitment. It's really interesting to sort of see people gravitate towards that kind of sort of teaching community, a community of educators, as well as being a part of a research community. Anyway, so that's my remarks. Look forward to any questions that you may have.
First, I'll say boiler up.
All right.
Recent, well, I guess 2010 graduate, so a little bit before this, and I can definitely attest to, I was a double major student starting in engineering and then going into liberal arts, and it feeling like two completely different schools and two different set of gen eds or core requirements. And it seems like what you have created is more of a voluntary certificate program that's run by College of Liberal Arts, and I'm wondering, do you foresee any integration or co-teaching from the other schools into those types of courses? Or I guess my second question is then, obviously when you get the endorsement from engineering, that's a big push, but how are you advertising this kind of and getting commitment to do a commitment to a certificate for something that is kind of voluntary and, like you said, like not even quite a minor?
So, good questions. And actually, I want it to be voluntary. One college said they were going to make it mandatory, and I said, please don't make it mandatory. That's not what we want, actually. We actually want students to do this because they think it is what they should be doing. And so, initially we had a lot of designs and plans about co-taught classes, the kind of sort of integration across colleges and the like. And, call me, shy in this regard. I just thought that was a good way for us to not get anywhere. Trying to get at scale, and that's the thing. I mean, to do this at scale, to get co-taught classes, at the size of a university that Purdue or the Big Ten is, I thought we just wouldn't be, we'd crash and burn. So we're absolutely open to it. I sort of saw that as being sort of version 2, version 3. We've got some discussions with other colleges to sort of develop additional themes that would have that sort of feature. And I guess my view of this is you sort of grow into it, into the complexity that you're talking about. And we have co-taught classes at Purdue. They're across many colleges, and they're wonderful. I mean, they're great. Don't get me wrong. But to do this for a size of a student population that we're managing, and also to do this in a way, so we are keenly focused on affordability and finishing on time. We haven't raised tuition since I think 9 years, we've been trying to sort of compress the course of study. In my college, we rolled out 24 three-year degree options 3 years ago. The entire campus is trying to move to a 3-year model as an option. And we're sort of trying to steal an idea that was introduced back in the 1880s by the president of Harvard, who was facing all sorts of pressure around from the medical school and the law school, who didn't think that any of their students should be have to get a bachelor's degree, and they wanted to just have them go straight there. And so he thought, well, if we could maybe get them through in 3 years, they could sort of smooth over some of the differences. So, and obviously the rest of the world does this. So we're trying to not add time to degree, and so that's another sort of pinch point in terms of sort of the complexity of what we're doing. But we're trying to get there.
Thank you for your presentation. I wonder if your mind has changed about that since you've just heard a school that's twice the size of yours was able to accomplish it to scale.
Which is twice the size?
I had two.
UNC?
Florida, Central
Florida.
Florida. Yeah. But my question was, I had two questions. One was, so you've mentioned that, at the end of your talk, you mentioned there's even a little bit of arm twisting here. It's not, and you're presenting something that's very different from the two presentations we just heard in a couple different ways. One is that it's on a much hastier time scale, and then the other is that it sounds like you're not really looking for this kind of ground up grassroots buy-in from the faculty. And I'm wondering if you could say a little bit about what the kind of collateral damage of that has been, or what you see as the compromises of that. But I also would be interested in number two to hear you talk a little bit about the content of this cornerstone curriculum, and how it compares to the other courses that fulfill the same requirements. You said there's buy-in from engineering, but I'm wondering how much of that is like student generated. Often one of the things I like to see resisted is students choosing something that seems like an easier path with a lower threshold for success. So if you could talk about those two things. Yeah.
So the sort of the intellectual drive for this, I sort of set up I think that the environment, but the intellectual sort of muscle behind it is a community of scholars, of faculty members in my college who wanted to do this. And that number is up to about 55 Cornerstone teaching faculty, and who sort of step forward because they see this as being something that they want to do. It's so in many ways. So in many ways, I think that a lot of this is, and all of the sort of the approvals and the sort of process and the like is all sort of adheres to every letter of the sort of curricular process at the university, which is all faculty owned. As a dean, I can't offer a certificate. Because I think it's a good idea. It has to come through sort of a bottom-up approach. Now, there's no question that there is conflict, particularly around from those parts of our college that have historically been the providers of the oral and written communication programs, and that is that's real, and it's ongoing. As far as so the arm twisting, I would say is that the one example I did of arm twisting is like as I've sort of explained to our college, we could not hire faculty. We lost 20% of our credit hours, 40% of our majors. The university stood behind us in terms of the size of our faculty. We could not hire faculty for a long time. It would be a crippling blow to the place. Or we can create some alternative ways that we can think about how we bring new faculty on, and that's sort of what we've done. And it's garnered, you know, it's very much a work in progress in terms of sort of how this unfolds. But up to this point, it's been, I think, the pros far outweigh the cons, and it's, you know, it's creating I have not talked about some other pieces that have to do with Degree Plus, which is a way for students to do 2 degrees in 4 years, that this is sort of a pathway towards, and a few other ways that this connects into some other initiatives. But overall, I would say that this really is about, you know, a group of, not an insignificant group of faculty members coming together and trying to advance a concept.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so we heard 3 very different approaches to this question, and now it's time for lunch. So let me just explain the rest of the day till about 1 o'clock or 1:15. There's lunch. You can just make a line there and go on 2 sides of the table. And please bring it back in. As I said, there are questions on your table. They are actually ordered differently. There are 3 different ways in which these questions are ordered. So I would ask you at the table to discuss, you know, the first one first, and then if you get to the second one, do the second one, and so on. And that way we can at least make sure that we hear about all 3 of the questions. So if you would bring your lunch back and have those discussions, and we'll do that for maybe about an hour, maybe a little bit less, depending on, we'll figure out how everyone's feeling. And then we'll do some reporting out and let our guests react to some of your ideas from there. And of course, you're not limited to those questions if you want to have discussions about other things. They're pretty broad topics. So please enjoy lunch, and we'll see you back in here. Thanks.
Bag. I don't have a bag. Maybe there's a plastic bag in the lunch. I just wanted to say hi. My name is Paula from the library. Love your question.